Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, hello and welcome to the Flipping the Future conference. As the project manager of Creative Flip, it is my great pleasure to greet you on behalf of our consortium, the Goethe-Institut as the lead partner, European Creative Hubs Network, Idea Consult, BVA Economics and Policy, 3S, and Intellectual Property Institute Luxembourg. We would like to thank you for joining us on this occasion, which represents the pinnacle of our 2.5-year-long EU co-funded pilot project. Under the slogan, Shaping Policy, Taking Action, the 2-day final conference of Creative Flip will gather key stakeholders for the CCSI, EU and national policymakers, representatives of European and pan-European networks, intermediary bodies, financiers, but also grassroots organizations, cultural creative professionals, and innovators. As you can see from our rich program for the next 2 days, we intend to cover a wide variety of topics, from moving towards the new normal and discussing lessons learned from the disruptions caused by the pandemic, to hearing about good practice examples and innovative solutions that emerged during this time. We will also discuss interesting topics such as access to finance for culture and creative sectors and industries, new EU funding opportunities, and how to navigate your way through the financing jungle. We will look into the topic of current creative skills mismatches, future of skills for CCSI, also through the prism of cross-sectoral cooperation and peer learning, and many, many other interesting topics. And during the Creative Flip final conference, we will also showcase our work of the last 2 years, the experience, achievements, and outputs for the issues central to the CCSI: finance, learning, innovation, and patenting Flip. We wish to present to you our contributions towards achieving a more resilient and future-proof sector, as well as to discuss co-creating good policies and taking meaningful actions to reach this goal. Please join us in flipping the future for CCSI. I would also like to use this opportunity to invite you to use all the amenities that the conference platform has at its disposal, the networking, chat, and Slido functions, to get in touch with other participants, with our team, but also to pose questions for our upcoming speakers. And without further ado, it is really my great pleasure to pass on the word now to Dr. Elke Kaschl-Mohni, Regional Director for Southwest Europe at the Goethe-Institut, who will be moderating the opening session of this conference. Thank you, Elke.
Dubravka. Also from my side, welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the opening session of Flipping the Future, which will set the scene for what lays ahead of us in this so very decisive moment in time for the culture and creative sectors and industries. So let's shape policy and take action. To kick us off, I'm highly honored now to first give the floor to Themis Christophidou, Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, for an opening statement via video message.
Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations on completing the first and very successful phase of the Creative Flip project. Your focused work has brought together a wide range of actors involved in cultural and creative industries over common goals and in pursuit of common solutions. One example was a wonderful event a year and a half ago in the Creative Hub in Molenbeek. It was a space to discuss how to move forward together, how to make a difference together. And I must also mention the Creatives Unite platform, born out of the need for a response to the pandemic, a common space for and by the cultural and creative sectors. Creatives Unite has engaged well over 35,000 users so far and has proven to be a very helpful resource. So I am delighted that Creatives Unite will continue in the next phase of the Flip project as we are slowly emerging from the crisis. In the area of skills development, Creative Flip has been active as well. Flip has built bridges between schools and creative hubs through collaboration and exchanges. One standout example was the rural Fab Lab Buinho in the south of Portugal. They teamed up with the Santa Maria School of Beja to see how electronic waste and creative robotics could help tackle early school leaving. This and many other heartwarming projects have benefited EU citizens through the efforts of FLIP. Such successes pave the way for a bright future ahead for this project. Now that the unprecedented crisis seems to have a tentative end in sight, we must continue working together. The EU policy work on a common path to Europe's safe reopening can help in this endeavor. So can the additional financial resources made available through various EU funds. I'm proud that the special 100 million euro call we did under Erasmus Plus on partnerships for creativity last year. It is infusing the much needed money into diverse projects. But on a much bigger scale, there are also the Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative, the support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency, and the Recovery and Resilience Facility. These can all be used for the cultural and creative sectors. REACT-EU and the future cohesion policy can provide support as well. All of this comes alongside the new Creative Europe program, the new Erasmus Plus program, Horizon Europe, Digital Europe, InvestEU, and other programs. And of course, the new European Bauhaus, linking aesthetics and culture with the European Green Deal and sustainable living. And if this long list of funding programs tells us anything, it tells us that the cultural and creative sectors are among the priorities of the EU agenda. I urge you to embrace this potential. And I hope that, following the example of FLIP, other projects will keep making the case for culture as a key element of the European political landscape. Dear friends, congratulations once more to Creative FLIP and the team for all you have achieved so far. I look forward to what the next phase of this project will bring. We are on this path with you because together we can achieve so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Themis Christophidou, for these highly encouraging words from the side of the EU Commission. Now, live with me here in the studio is Christian Ehler, long-standing member of the European Parliament and a staunch advocate for the culture and creative sectors and industries in the Brussels political arena. You have been a member of the Parliament's Industry, Research and Energy Committee for more than a decade. As rapporteur for both Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, you have been one of the leading figures in the design and implementation of the EU research and innovation programs. And among many, many, many other positions that you hold, you are vice chair of the Panel for the Future of Science and Technology, an EP think tank, and a substitute member in the Committee on Culture and Education. We are so delighted to have you with us today, and I gladly now give you the floor for your opening address. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. And if I might remember you in the very beginning, this project had been initiated by the European Parliament, which just shows what had been changing over the last years. I think that the Parliament, being the agora, the marketplace of Europe, where citizens, but also institutions and yes, the creative sector would appeal to discuss the future of Europe. And what happens right now is not just to be explained in reference to funding and programs and so on. So I think there is a general understanding in Europe and also a growing understanding in politics that the future of Europe and the future of our societies have a lot to do with this creative sector, with creative industries, but also the individuals, the citizen participation, which is always strong in the creative process. And I think what you had been seen over the last years is that the creative sector went into the center of politics all of a sudden. That for many reasons. First of all, I think cultural institutes like you are more and more essential because we learn in Europe that given this kind of YouTube and digital surface, which creates the image that we know each other, that we're in contact with each other, all of a sudden, from the right and from the left, from the extremes in Europe, they're able to create this old image of the enemy, the others. And I think that does work or doesn't work related to the understanding that we have about the other cultures in Europe. And so from my point of view, I was very happy that the Goethe-Institut was leading that undertaking, because it's a traditional cultural institution, but it can create the links in many directions, and we want to strengthen that. Secondly, I mean, a revolution is going to happen. Digitalization is going to change the creative sectors dramatically. And I think we wanted to reflect that, because it is reflecting the change in our society, but it's reflecting also new challenges, but it's reflecting also an economic dimension which is unforeseen, with all its potential, but also with all the challenges, given, for example, what is the traditional IP right situation, the copyright situation for artists. So in a way, things are in a dramatic change to the positive, but related to a lot of challenges on the other hand. And so what we did is we started that discussion in the parliament over 5 years. We carefully listened to the sector, and you had been very successful. So you had been shifting the issue into the center of European politics. So you're no longer in the silo of cultural policies. This is now embedded in the research program. It's the biggest upraise in the history of the European research program, 2.3 billion for the cultural heritage and for the creative sector. But you're deeply integrated into other programs. And that leads me to a third aspect. I think, I mean, we talk a lot about climate change, digitalization, but in many times it's driven out of a dystopia. We fear climate change. People are not knowing what is going to happen with this world. But I think what happens now is that there's a better understanding that we can't just answer that by regulation, by technology. It has to be translated into society. And from my point of view, there might be a completely new dimension and task for the creative sector, because you have the power to transform a dystopia into an utopia. So people will be able to react, to reflect, to answer, to adapt to the challenges ahead, if that is not just driven out of a negative, driven out of a fearsome attitude, if that is attractive, if it's stylish, if it fits to the lifestyle of a new generation, if an elder generation can adopt. So in a way, I think there is a multiple of reason why the cultural and creative sector is so much in the focus of policies and politics in recent days. It's an interesting development, and I think the undertaking you're doing right now is important, because we still have to learn about the sector. It's very diverse. It's somewhere between economics and mere artistic aspect, between a non-commercial and a commercial aspect. And it's something we have to understand better to adopt our policies, instruments, and the funding.
Thank you so much. You mentioned the potential and the chance of CCSI that find themselves in the heart of European policy, that find themselves in basically all the major funding schemes. You also mentioned challenges and the potential to move from dystopia to utopia. We'll be very, very interested to hear more from you as we go a bit further along in this session. Thank you so much. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Johannes Ebert, who is joining us from Munich. Johannes Ebert has been chairman of the board and secretary general of the Goethe-Institut, the German Cultural Center, since 2012. Before that, he was regional director, Eastern Europe and Central Asia for the Goethe-Institut in Moscow, as well as regional director, North Africa, Middle East in Cairo, among many other positions in the Goethe-Institut. One of the declared objectives of the Goethe-Institut is indeed to strengthen European collaboration, integration, and social cohesion. And in particular, in recent years, the Goethe-Institut has also upscaled its engagement in the culture and creative sectors and industries. And a case in point is the lead of the project Creative Flip. So, Johannes, Ebert, thank you so much for joining us today. And I now gladly pass the word to you, to your opening address.
Thank you very much, Elke. Dear Christian Ehler, dear Michela, Magas, dear Sten-Kristian, Saluveer, dear colleagues, dear friends, I wish you all the best from a very hot Munich. We had a very hot summer days, the last days, but it's also very nice to be outside a little bit more than before. I remember very much in 2019 when we had this huge Creative Flip conference in Brussels. Themis Christophidou mentioned it in her speech. And it was a beehive of ideas, of meetings, of creativity. And of course, it would be nicer to meet you all in the same ambience, in the same mood, in the same surroundings. But I'm very happy to open this conference today after so much has happened in the last 1.5 years. Creative Flip, as Christian Ehler already mentioned, was an initiative by the Parliament, and it is coordinated by the DG Education and Culture. And I'm very happy that representatives of both institutions are meeting with us today. I'm also very thankful to our partners in this project, in this important project in Creative Flip, the European Creative Network, Hubs Network, Idea Consult, VVA Economics and Policy, 3S, and Intellectual Property Institute Luxembourg. Creative Flip's main objective was to foster a strong and healthy creative and culture sector. It was initiated with the aim to formulate answers and to formulate new ideas for to solve systemic weaknesses and challenges the CCSI have been and still are confronted with. And this is even more important today in the COVID-19 crisis, which hopefully is getting under control now. But we experienced that the whole crisis had a devastating impact on the cultural and creative sectors across Europe and around the world. We all know that venues have been closed, theaters, museums, that performances had to be cancelled. In the light of these developments, I'm very happy that Commissioner Maria Gabriel initiated the founding of Creatives Unite, a platform that, together with our colleagues from the European Hubs Network, was launched in June 2020 to connect the members of the CCSI and to bring together new ideas in a digital way. Yet a crisis is always a chance. It is always a time where you can rethink and where you can formulate new ideas. We know that the COVID-19 has been a major threat for the cultural and creative institution, but we also see that many of them have shown a huge flexibility and resilience to this situation. This ability for crisis resilience is a much needed skill for a future-proof society. And this is why we need projects such as Creative Flip to gather these informations and to collect these information and to use them productively for the future. As Themis Christophidou and Christian Ehler have mentioned, the multi-annual financial framework 2021 to 2027 provides the CCS with more funding than we've hoped before. There is the new European Bauhaus as a big project, the Knowledge and Innovation Community, Culture and Creativity, and many more who contribute to shape and to enable the CCSI stakeholders. And they're also dependent that the CCSI stakeholders take the initiative and take part in these projects. Now for our conference, it is crucial to build on the most promising forward-looking approaches and to transform them into sustainable policies and practices. Policymakers, but also intermediaries, networks, cultural and creative professionals have an important role to play in this process. I'm very much looking forward to listen, learn, and engage in discussions on your insight on Creative Flip's innovative approaches to co-creation, access to finance, research, new business models, IP protection, and lifelong learning, about finding tools and lessons learned. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best for the next 2 days. Fruitful discussions, and I invite you to participate to Flipping the Future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johannes, for this outlook on Creative Flip. You also mentioned what I think will be the guiding thread for the coming 2 days, this potential of turning a crisis into a chance. And with this, I'm now very happy to welcome our keynote speaker, Michela Magas, from the Industries Commons Foundation. Welcome so much to you, Michela Magas. You are an innovation catalyst in between science and art, design and technology, academic research, and industry, with a highly impressive biography. You're an innovation advisor to the European Commission and the G7 leaders. You're also a member of President von der Leyen's high-level roundtable for the new European Bauhaus. You're the creator of the Industry Commons Foundation, a non-profit organization promoting interdisciplinary knowledge exchange, skills acquisition, innovation methodologies, and new knowledge creation. You're the founder and CEO of MTF Labs, a global community platform of around 8,000 creative innovators and scientific researchers. In 2017, you were awarded European Woman Innovator of the Year. And the year before, you received the Innovation Luminary Award for Creative Innovation. Michela Magas, you aim at policy making that is informed by the grassroots. So we are eager to hear from you now what this means and how this can be done. The floor is yours.
Thank you for this really generous and actually quite daunting introduction. It's a bit scary for me to listen to. People always ask me, how do I have enough hours in the day? If you could please load my slides, and then we can start with some wonderful images which support our work in translating to policy directly from grassroots experimentation. I think we have started in the middle for some reason, and they seem to be okay. Here we go. So, as I say, it's a great pleasure to be here, particularly with this really influential community that is from the Creative Flip and from the culture creative sector, which has actually made such an important contribution to policymaking and is now really placed at the center at high level of policymaking. I start with a moment just before the pandemic, which will be very familiar to you. Two big announcements, one from industry, which I think is actually relevant for us. The other one is on the right-hand side, you will recognize it, is back from the time when we could all gather together at the Creative Flip conference. But it was a seminal moment when Maria Gabriel announced that the culture and creative sector is her top priority. And I think we have seen just how much this has influenced the policy since. Even during the pandemic, the efforts that have been made, and also particularly taking center stage with the new European Bauhaus. Now, if we wind back to quite a few years back, so let's say 2014, when none of this seemed possible, we will actually see that our grassroots experimentation was in its infancy in terms of joining across different disciplines. And here's us, for instance, experimenting with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Barbican in London, between the science and the arts and technology, with the Brainwave Quartet. Now, this was our third year of experimentation. It was all very new at the time. At that year, we were invited to do 5 events around the world, including Cambridge, Massachusetts, with MIT and Harvard. And therefore, this approach from the Creative culture creative sector in reaching out to other disciplines and actually setting the methodologies for this cross-domain collaboration was actually being noticed far and wide already. And the manifesto was written for this from the Ivy League, initiated by the Ivy League colleges in the US, which then we brought straight back to the European Commission. So this was an unusual situation. Now, we followed this by saying, okay, well, this community really needs supporting. And so rolled out a series of pilots with enabling tools and methodologies for innovation so that the communities could be facilitated and they could speed up innovation. And we actually proved that this cross-disciplinary environment supported by these tools could really make a huge difference in how fast innovation can be deployed. So here's a really good example of feeding policy directly from the grassroots. Exactly 74% of the Connect Advisory Forum innovation recommendations for the Horizon program were fed directly from there. And another area where our sector has been really pioneering is in reframing our notion of ability in the context of new technological affordances. These are a couple of success stories from very, very many that we've had. And it's been particularly interesting to inform the future of work. And another area has been experimentation with frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence and neural networks. And these are examples where our sector has been really testing new formats and affordances of these technologies, and also really understanding how they affect human beings. And this is another really important lesson. Now we roll forward to 2021, and this is the new European Bauhaus Conference. And here for the first time, the culture is being placed at the center of our societal transformation towards the Green New Deal. And I'm privileged to be a member of President von der Leyen's high-level roundtable for this initiative, together with a really inspiring and diverse a group of colleagues, 18 colleagues. And if you look at the language that's being used during the New European Bauhaus Conference, which, by the way, attracted 8,000 participants, which is a sign of how important this is, you will find that these terms are really familiar because they have been the core of the activities in our sector. And so here is, for instance, where our sector is questioning the Industry 4.0 automation paradigm. And here we're working with robotics and automation in the AI Impact Lab in Örebro in creative ways to emphasize the human-centric perspective. So this is our sector reacting to the automation paradigm by saying, well, actually, we need to look at the impact of these technologies on human beings. And guess what? Industry has progressed now to the Industry 5.0 human-centric paradigm. But at the same time, because we are now feeding policy directly at high level, in European Bauhaus, we have progressed to the paradigm of more than human. This is an ecosystemic approach where we include other species and we include other systems which can help us to transition towards the Green Deal. So we are already leading to the next paradigm, which we are pretty sure the industry will adopt. Now, if we look at inclusion, that we have been really leading in inclusion. So, for instance, these are our labs in Stockholm, more than 800 participants, all ages, all backgrounds, from children with learning disabilities to difficulties to VPs of large corporations. 53% women in a technology platform prototyping, the other 47%, three other gender categories. So this is something that is an example of how we can drive societal transformation from within our sector. And of course, inclusion is important for Industry 4.0, where it is looked at as including several categories of people. But actually in the European Bauhaus, we have progressed to radical inclusion, where we emphasize on where we converge. So it's a completely different starting point, and we'd like to see that adopted. Another aspect where we have been leading is in testing new systems for governance, peer-to-peer, or intellectual property tracking, for instance, as demonstrated here in our labs at Slush in Helsinki, where we were registering intellectual property creation in real time at the point of creation. And we were registering it in the blockchain. Now, this system is something that I have proposed to the European Innovation Council, or version of this system, and this has been rolled into the new EIC marketplace that I now advise on. Now, For Industry 5.0, technology still means digitalization, but in NEB, technology is both frontier and vernacular skills. So that means that, for instance, traditional crafts are also considered technology in the context of culture and creativity. And we have always been driving this activities with moonshots, and this is Imogen Heap in our labs in Stockholm, sending her voice to the moon via the Dwingeloo telescope in the north of Holland, having her voice bounced off the moon and reflected back to her. And this completely shifts our perspective as to why we learn, why we exchange knowledge, what our missions are. And we had 83 people in our high-level labs send their voices to the moon and back. Now, Industry 5.0 is upskilling by training. This is a traditional approach. But in the new European Bauhaus, the future of work is driven by missions. And we see that this is a really, really good approach, even for workforce in industry, for upskilling and for training in particularly new needs of hybrid occupations. So finally, one really, really important part, which is a major contribution from our sector and to policymaking, and that is in demonstrating that we can create a space for common understanding. And this is about being able to work across disciplines, across communities, and this is now a major, major mission for the new European Bauhaus movement, which is creating, of course, a movement for a behavioral change towards the green transition. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you so much, Michela Magas, for this highly insightful view into how action can shape policy, and we'll come back to that later. First, I would like to now welcome Sten-Kristian Saluveer from Accelerate Estonia. Welcome to you, Sten-Kristian. You're a film and media innovation strategist, an awarded producer, public speaker and moderator, as well as content and technology entrepreneur. You have numerous positions to your name as funder of Storytech.eu, a media tech accelerator and innovation hub. You're heading the innovation track Next at the Marché du Film at Cannes Film Festival. You're partner in the Exit Academy, advising startup founders, among many other endeavors that you're pursuing between Europe and Asia in impressively transcontinental cross-disciplinary ways. You're also behind various highly innovative initiatives that seize the moment to find proactive solutions to today's global challenges. So, Sten-Kristian Saluveer, please inspire us today about how to hack the crisis and what would happen if we gave you a country for a year. You have the word.
Thank you. Good morning. And very grateful to be part of this wonderful conference and talking really what important roles creativity can make in our societies and how to take this even further. So in the next 10 minutes or so, and I'm just double checking, can you hear me well? Because occasionally there are audio questions. I will talk about how to solve wicked problems through enabling policy and experimentation. So next slide, please. So of course, as you know, all of those 4 speakers told today, in the world today, we are facing a lot of global wicked problems, and those wicked problems are calling for new and bold solutions. My 4 speakers talked about digitalization, the impact on society, but definitely we have to also talk about climate change. Right now in Estonia, in the past 3 or 4 days, we have broken all the heat wave records. And obviously there are issues to be tackled in population and migration, power and corruption, inequality, health and livelihood, hate and conflict, technologies, nature and ecology, and obviously the COVID pandemic. So those global wicked problems are really on everybody's agenda, from policymakers to innovation practitioners and, let's say, startups in the field. But the key question is who and how we can take action and responsibility to find solutions to these very pressing problems. Next, please. So what I would basically say is that we are living in a very unique time where we can reimagine the public-private partnership in Europe and beyond, and Europe here can be a very big change maker. So we can combine innovation, adding scaling. And then, of course, the key critical aspect in there is that how would we implement those innovations as well? Because any innovations which aren't implemented don't really benefit the society or the consumers at large. Next, please. Could I have a next slide, please? So, as Michela said before, it is a very, very interesting time where the combination of creativity and technology can contribute for the new ambitious goals for Europe, whether we are thinking about Horizon Europe, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, Media Invest, and other programs. We look at the national level with national recovery and resilience of big changes catalyzed within the past year. We can harness for that the breakthroughs in different types of core technologies, whether it's AI, European data spaces, or other R&D leaps. The timing is also amplified by these really, really interesting artist or citizen or community-driven moonshots. And obviously, the whole background of the larger digital economy and metaverse that will enable new economic models between creators and audiences are all that are catalyzing this very, very unique moment. Next, please. So I think we are also in a very big cross-section because we do have finally an opportunity to really think about what type of policy would be the most appropriate to address these changes. And historically, we know that policy on national levels, regional levels, and also at the European levels has been mostly descriptive or prescriptive, saying what we can do or what we should do or how should we steer the industry. But I think it's really interesting with the emergence of these big structural factors, and especially with these very big potential technologies such as artificial intelligence, for example, is that we can move from prescriptive to enabling policy. Instead of regulating, we can think about opening up. Instead of fixing opportunities, we can think about creating opportunities in the market. And those would come on the lines of how can we address the global and not only for the local. We can set bold steering measures and not be fixed in the past, including new digital models. And again, as was said in the introduction, the whole idea of the digital economy and streaming platforms and so forth is something, for example, that my son is engaging with. And those existing work models in creative industries might be not highly appropriate for him or his plans for the future. We have to enable experimentation and foster experimentation, create fast feedback loops, share responsibility and license to operate, and think about really different types of resources and not only money. So this really comes down to how we together discuss, such as here in today's conference, how can we build frames and market opportunities and implement those bold results. Next, please. So this is a unique combination and unique timing for the public and private sector collaboration. Think about PPP 2.0 or 3.0, where the private sector has right now the capacity to innovate very rapidly if the market conditions are met and a competitive advantage is given. They can scale through community and they can rapidly iterate on the solution. So we're not looking for 3 months life cycles, but 3-year life cycles, but we could even look for 1 week life cycles, as I will explain later. And the public sector, of course, can be amazing in discovering the new policy champions. They can identify the missions and priority areas, validate the matches with innovations, and contribute the license to operate, and take those radical innovations for implementation for everyone else. Next, please. So just to give you a practical example, I would like to discuss the case of Estonia. And Estonia is quite known as a digital leader, but what we really realized is that the challenges posed by COVID and other big market shifts, such as the aging of the population, the need for restructure creative industry, it forced us to ask the question, if there was an open rule book between the public and the private sector, what market could be created? Next, please. So last year, we initiated a project called the Global Hack that set to address a very wicked problem. So if 3 billion people worldwide are in lockdown, then what kind of solutions the community could bring to hack the future and never put us into the same situation again. Next, please. So in last March, when the COVID crisis happened in Estonia, the public and the private sector unprecedentedly decided to collaborate as never before. And I will just give you a very quick timeline. On March 12th, in the evening, around 6 p.m., the Minister of ICT, Kaimar Karu, understood that we have to move. The COVID crisis is influencing our country so much. So at 6 p.m., he called for action. We should do something. The next morning at 9:30 a.m., the idea of Hack the Crisis, a public-private hackathon to fight the COVID, was initiated. At 10 a.m., we validated the idea by key government decision makers. By 2:30 p.m., Accelerate Estonia, our mission platform within the Ministry of Economy and Trade, launched the hackathon online. And 2 days later, we had 30 teams working with 1,000 people participating to find community-sourced solutions to several key issues related to the pandemic. The event was so successful and inspired both the community and the collaboration between the public and the private sector that we actually even decided to take it further. So a little bit less than a month later, the Accelerate Estonia team with our key partners decided to take this global hackathon, idea global. And we managed to pull off the global hack that joined thousands, if not 10,000s of people all over the world to find those community sourced solutions. And we received coverage in CNN, Forbes, and other major media, and tens of solutions found through that unique platform actually were implemented in Estonia, in the EU, and worldwide as well. So this demonstrated very clearly that the bold public and private initiative can become a global movement and find solutions and develop solutions for those global wicked problems in a very, very rapid time frame. Next, please. So the global hack really inspired us to think a little bit further. What could be the next step for Estonia? And we decided that let's take the public-private partnership and enable innovation aquariums between the public, the private sector, the innovators, and the policymakers. So our methodology in doing there is to find and excite global innovators, to validate ideas and concepts through policymakers and mission boards, identify experiments out of those crazy ideas with key stakeholders on a countrywide, and execute and learn experience through our unique R&D measure. And of course, once we run an experience, we aim to launch moonshots for Estonia, Europe, and the world as such. Next, please. So Accelerate Estonia program, and I'll just give you very briefly, is calling audacious innovators to join our unique platform, which is a test bed for moonshot experiments, combining the urgency of startups and innovators and the power of the public sector. Next, please. Next, please. Could I have a next slide, please? Yes, so we have selected our key mission areas, which are mental health, and how could we take a mental health service support from 3 months to 3 days. We want to definitely tap into the big requirement of achieving the green turn in Europe in our own terms. And of course, for creative industries, we are open for all kinds of wildcard ideas that will change the world very expectedly. We launched our full program at last year, September, and I already have to say that we have signed 3 very ambitious ideas. Out of one of them will very clearly tap into the potential of the European data spaces and the need for revolutionizing copyright in European creative industries as well. Next slide, please. So what I would like to encourage all is to think about that in creative industries and policies, we always are afraid of failed outcomes, of failed KPIs, of failed targets and so forth. But a failed outcome in Accelerate Estonia's term can be a successful experiment. If an experiment demonstrates for us that there exists a systematic barrier for legislation, for financing, for stakeholder involvement, then it's a wonderful outcome. And if we get more failed experiments, then we actually understand how country can systematically innovate and innovate again. Next, please. So I also mentioned the fact that quite often also in creative industries and creative industries policymaking, we tend to think about budgets. Budgets always seem to be the key issue where things get stuck. But I would also encourage to think that there are other resources what the public-private partnership can engage in 2021 and beyond. It could be about data, of giving accesses to data pool. It can be giving accesses to policymakers and key stakeholders to validate the ideas. It could be giving social license to experiment with a bold solution on a whole region or a country. It could be also developing a joint R&D framework. And I would think about the Horizon Europe program, which has taken some very ambitious leaps. And also the huge opportunity for innovation can be enabling engagement with serial ministerial leadership to have discussions of how to better enforce and deploy innovations. Next slide, please. In Estonia, we've been very, very precious to have a committed leadership from the highest level, the President of Estonia, Mr. Kersti Kaljulaid, Minister of ICT and Entrepreneurship, Mr. Andres Sutt, and Minister of Social Inclusion, Signe Riisalo. And I wanted to put those stakeholders here that just a week ago, we organized our second biggest reach out for global innovators to find solutions for those missions, what we announced. And we arranged 56 one-to-one meetings between those high-level stakeholders, you can see here on slide, and the global innovators, so they could have an open, a fruitful and forward-looking dialogue. What kind of ideas can be taken further? What kind of ideas align with the agendas of those decision makers, and how the public-private partnership could flourish? So in other words, creating trust, taking down boundaries, and creating that enabling policy. Next slide, please. So our biggest motto has been building the trust between the public and the private through our policy mechanism. And we'd like to ask ourselves every day if we would find an innovator from creative sector or anywhere else, and if we could give that innovator the trust, the opportunity, and the responsibility to give them a country, what kind of amazing things they could do with it. And with my last slides, next please, I would like to congratulate everybody on this wonderful conference and ask you a question. It is definitely time for this unique breakthrough for Europe, and Europe can show global leadership. Are you, we, or everybody else attending today ready to take the first bold steps? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sten-Kristian, for these highly fascinating examples of these, as you call them, reimagined public-private partnerships. And you showed us how it can be done in Estonia. And my question to you to directly follow up would be, what is needed to upscale these experiments? What is it that you would need from Brussels?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think one of the key points what I would like to bring really forward is I think something what we can cultivate is the level of trust, and this is the most important capacity. And what I basically mean by this is that quite often policy has been executed from a perspective of, let's say, stakeholder lobbying, policy development, and there is always the policy developer and the client, right? And I think if especially regarding those new core technologies and the amazing research and those consultations that are going on right now. So Europe right now is finalizing the consultation on the European data plan. They are finalizing the consultation on AI. They are finalizing the consultation on creative policy, as we are discussing today. And I think one of those best things that can come out of those is not to regulate our collaboration, but to basically create frameworks of collaboration where we can have a dialogue. And the key thing there is that the European Commission and the policymakers can be a very trustful deployer or implementer of those innovations, right? For the communities, for the countries, for the citizens of Europe. And I think the key role would be let the innovators to innovate and propose what exactly we need to take the step further, and have the regulators and the policymakers to help them to deploy those innovations in an open framework. So that would be my key wish.
Thank you. So it's about trust and frameworks of collaboration, but not regulation. I would like to bring this back to you, Christian Ehler. How does this sound to you from the perspectives of Brussels, sitting here in the heart of EU policy?
I mean, you could ironically say how to develop a pig into a racing horse. Let's be honest. I mean, in the setting of European instrument is still fairly traditional. We have a top-down research program. We're living the silos of cultural programs. There is not much interlinkage in between. And I think what we are doing right now, and that had been part of this kind of agora discussion we had been creating in the parliament over the last years, to understand the needs of the sector better, but also to reflect a little bit how we are doing innovation policies and actually what is in a more broader sense needed. And I think that there are a few new attempts. First of all, yes, it must be much more risk-driven. We fear to lose money, and as had been rightly said, if something fails, that is not necessarily a failure. It could be also a step forward. And I think that kind of risk-driven, risk-affine way to allocate funding is important, but needs a change of nature also in the institutions. Secondly, what hadn't been mentioned here so far is, yes, we look carefully and curiously at my age, although I'm coming from industry and from biotechnology, we're looking to these wonderful bubbles, but we have to be aware that, let's say, the internationalization and the Europeization of all that efforts is still not as advanced as it should be. It's still a little bit of an illusion of an elite, that they know about each other, that they're close to each other. It's a little bit created of this kind of digital world. But I think coming back to the role of cultural institutions like the Goethe-Institut and there are others, is really, we should be aware that this might be still now a fairly elitist undertaking. And we should be aware that we have contradicting forces. We have, on the one hand, this young generation reaching out, being familiar, don't accept limits in any way, be it borders, be it regulation or something like that. But on the other hand, let's be realistic. We are in a political situation where this is not necessarily shared by the overall population of the Europeans anymore. I mean, this is a very contradictive situation. What's positive is it's no longer we're breaking up even these contradictions. So if we look to Hungary, if we look to Poland, it's really worrisome what governments are actually doing. And still there's a younger group in the generation in Poland and Hungary which doesn't buy that. So I think right now, even if we see these contradictive movements, there is also a challenge, a positive attitude, because it doesn't longer work like that. So there is always, I think, a positive aspect. But in more principal terms, first of all, I think that we have to translate that to the general population, because there is a certain danger, and we should be realistic that we have this right-wing or left-wing rhetoric of the elitist societies, and we have to translate that to the broader population. And I think this idea of let's say, more citizen-based approach is a very important one. But there's a lot of talk, but not much implementation. And we shouldn't talk just about citizen-driven innovation. If interested citizens are doing that, we have to explain this ever-changing world, this dramatically changing world, to the broader society. And so that has a very traditional moment still, that cultural institutions have to make the broader population understand about the others. And this is not given. I mean, we are really in a situation where on the one hand, we have an internationalization, we have a reach out of a generation, they're smart, they're close to each other, they communicate via the digital, and at the same time, we have a contradictive development in many member states, and we have to somehow have an idea about that. And the other thing is we have to be more playful. I mean, even in the traditional industry, I mean, there's a certain reluctance when we had been discussions with big industry premiers saying, would you integrate in disruptive innovation process creators and so? They had been fairly skeptical. From my point of view, this American discussion about disruptive innovation is much more centered on disruptive business model, whereas the European potential could be that disruptive innovation is related to the creative factor, the combination of creativity and frontier research. But they're limited to that because the traditional setting in industry is not meant like that. And we have to open up experimental fields. We have to give creators access to production facilities. We have to integrate that in calls. We shouldn't talk about quantum without taking creators into that kind of process. And there is also a certain reluctance in the traditional research community about that. I mean, let's be honest. The fight between the parliament and me and my colleagues and the research ministers to integrate the creative sector into the research program was a harsh one. That sounds nice right now, but there had been a lot of reluctance, and there is still a preference for the silos. I mean, even in terms of this link between cultural heritage and creative and science is hard to achieve because cultural heritage is not seen part of the future. It's there's still a conservative approach. And when the parliament was proposing, for example, a collaborative workspace for all the museums and archives, there had been a wild discussion how we should organize that within the museums and the cultural sector and the cultural ministers. But then when we said, yeah, we want to have a cultural collaborative workspace, but this is not a kind of digital access for tourism or something like that. This is a completely new perception that we create a common collaborative workspace, which means also access for citizens, but researchers, creative artists, because heritage can be transferred and translated into the future. And there were the doors all of a sudden closed because the cultural minister said, what creators and scientists in the cultural heritage, and the scientists said, you know, why in a scientific program having cultural heritage? And you see that the institutionalized Europe needs to be much more flexible. But the good news is we can do that. And for the first time, we don't talk about the future in terms of what we would like to do. And if we would understand what we want to do, how to fund it, this time we have money. We have practically almost 6 billion euro we can spend on. And the question right now is, and I think that is the most important undertaking, is that we have to learn and we have to find a different approach, how to slice the calls, how to define the calls, because this top-down approach is not going to work. 50 years old like me and the same in the Commission are not going to develop smart cross-sectoral approaches. We need now carefully to listen to programs like FLIP and others, and to translate that then in the programs which are flexible, cross-sectoral, well-funded, and risk-driven.
Thank you so much for this really inside view into the heart of policymaking in Brussels, and also drawing our attention to the complexity of what it takes to actually move processes ahead and achieve change. And there I would like to turn back to Michela Magas, because you gave us fascinating examples about how such change and how innovative ideas and formats have been fed into the policy process during the past years. And my question to you would be, because it seems so easy and convincing how you do it, tell us, what is your success factor? What makes what you do successful? And where do you see the biggest obstacles?
Support from industry, weirdly enough. So basically, industry colleagues who actually saw the potential for advancement of innovation in industry through what we were doing. So industry came to us weirdly and said, can we give you some of our tools to experiment with, and realize that there's huge potential in our test beds, basically. They become test beds for industry applications. And since then, actually, industry has, we know from DGRTD that the industry has actually requested experimental labs for some of their new technologies. And of course, our sector has the methodologies to facilitate those types of labs. So, for instance, in the Connect Advisory Forum, when we were translating those findings from our pilots into policy recommendations, it was my colleagues on the advisory who were from Intel, from Siemens, for instance, Klaus Beetz, who's now head of EIT manufacturing, and we're still discussing about collaborations and this type of thing. So there are really, really great champions out there who are really thought leaders in their sectors, who really see the benefit that our sector and our methods can bring in this cross-disciplinary environment, which actually, and frontier technologies where we test them. Now, when you say challenges, I can tell you immediately that the challenges are very much, as Christian has said, and the way that we sort of break through is very much, I mean, I was full of admiration for Sten-Kristian's initiative, for instance. This is how we do it. We take the reins and we run with it, basically. It's the only way we can do it, because the system, as Christian has very clearly pointed out, is not set up for the small to medium enterprises and for the micro companies that dominate the culture creative sector. So the issue we have, for instance, is that the program could be a lot less risky if it was constructed with shorter, less risky timelines, where it could be there could be regular, let's say every 3 months, checkpoints to see how projects are progressing. It would incentivize projects, but it would also encourage that every 3 months the project gets an injection of cash and ensure cash flow for small players. At the moment, the current system is simply, no matter how great our ideas, is simply not set up for our sector to operate within, because we always have to have the large players hold the funding and actually administer it in very, very difficult ways, which can sometimes really hinder progress of particularly projects which are very innovative and which are punching above their weight. So this is one aspect which I think is really important to consider: how we administer funding, how we include the implementers and we educate implementers of the benefits that our sector can bring to the table, to include the small players, the regions, and also to really capitalize on the support we are getting from industry and endorsement we are getting from industry players.
Thank you so much. And now, as my last question, I would like to go back to you, Johannes, as director of the Goethe-Institut, as a culture institute that is really closely working with local cultural actors, practitioners, creatives in Europe and worldwide. At this very crucial moment in time for the culture and creative sectors and industries, what would your message, with all these voices of the stakeholders, their interests, their needs in mind, what would your message be to policymakers? What should be taken into account at this moment in time? What do we need to go into the future for the cultural and creative field?
I mean, I'm very fascinated by the inputs which have been given, and I really wrote some things down. The future of work is driven by missions, from descriptive to enabling and experiment-driven policy. And then what Christian Ehler said about risk affinity. And I remember a discussion with you, Christian Ehler, where you said the sector has to be self-confident. I think this has to be even more, this is even in COVID, even more important than before. But what we were discussing right now was the question of innovation. And I also see in my work that the risk affinity of legislation and of compliance regulations is too low. We are too slow, and we are having a big process in my institution to foster innovation, which is connected with the change of attitude. And this change of attitude, like we see in Michela or Sten-Kristian, it's there, but it's not there in huge dimension, and it's not there with policymakers who themselves are hindered by these legislative regulations. So I think this is a topic we really have to discuss, because I see that many European countries, mine included, is losing because innovation could be too slow, and this has something to do, we don't take enough risks. So this is a small statement. Then I always, my old message is, culture and creative production is not only a commodity, it's something which it's about values, which is about social cohesion, which is a field where we can discuss new and innovative solutions for the future. And I think the role that Christian Ehler mentioned, being a transmission instrument between more conservative, more even politically, in my view, dangerous tendencies, and an intellectual and progressive mainstreams. I think this is a challenge we have to take. And we're discussing this since the upcoming of populism, how we do it. I think we do not have enough answers to it. There are some experiments we did. I think this is another challenge. So there's so much on the table that we should discuss. I think for all of this, and this leads me back to the conference, I think for reliable and stable ecosystems, I think we need a clear framework from the legislators, which should encourage innovation, which is not so easy, as he mentioned, but I think this should be the goal, the vision. We should identify and use synergy, and we should try out, and there were some of them in the presentations of Michela and Sten-Kristian, we should try out new innovative formats. And what the conference can deliver is to bring these things together and to enable exchange. And I hope the impulses from Flip are going on. I think this should not be the first platform for these exchanges, but it should go on, because I see that much has happened since we started it.
Thank you so much to all four of you. This was such a highly fascinating discussion with so many of the issues touched upon that will guide us through and lead us through, and hopefully we will be picked up again during the next days to come. More risk, more trust, maybe more failure, new public and private partnerships, citizen-centered, more than human are just some of the keywords that were now kind of broached during this discussion. Thank you so much. And to the audience, please stay with us. We'll take a minute just to switch now to our first panel. So don't leave, stay with us. We'll have the first session that will now take a closer look at Creative Flip, what it is, what it has done, and what to take from it. Thank you so much.